to suspect that Trump's lawyer Todd Blanche is going to find it hard to get paid. So his final defense witness so disrespected the judge that the judge cleared the courtroom in order to scream at the man. His gotcha moment from last week was disproved yesterday by not just videotape, but C-SPAN videotape. At his gotcha moment from this week, from yesterday, that he got Michael Cohen to admit he had stolen money from Trump's company, turned out to have already been brought up in testimony a week ago. And both times, it underscores that either Trump illegally listed that stolen money as a reimbursement to Michael Cohen, which they deny, or Trump illegally listed the stolen money as legal expenses, which is what he is on trial for doing. And lawyer Todd Blanche also let his client be caught not just dozing off like every other day in court, but, to quote the New York Daily News, it appeared Trump was fully out and just woke up. His head was tipped back so far that he would have been looking at the ceiling when he opened his eyes. In other words, Trump was this close to drooling the drool of regret into the pillow of remorse. And there was that little issue afterwards. The first item, letter A, on the gag order against Trump, defendant is directed to refrain from making or directing others to make public statements about known or reasonably foreseeable witnesses. He talked afterwards about a witness. Oh, wait, this just in. I'm being told he talked afterwards about 2 witnesses.
And you saw what happened to a highly respected lawyer today, Bob Costello. Wow. I've never seen anything like that. Highly respected. The last 5 weeks. Andy McCarthy, to show he stole from the Trump organization, even as they're structuring a deal, blah, 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 and now I can't talk about it because, again, I have a gag order.
Even he knows he just broke the gag order. After the last 10 times to be exact, Justice Juan Merchan was explicit that next time he would have to consider jailing Trump. Well, Trump talked about witness Robert Costello, the one whom the judge metaphorically kicked in the gonads as the day came to a roaring end. And then, as you heard, he talked about witness Michael Cohen. And as the judge has also explicitly stated, it doesn't matter if he's reading or quoting somebody else's words. It's him talking about a witness. If there is any remaining doubt in Merchan's mind that the premise of the Trump defense is not some kind of refutation of the charges, but is instead merely an all-out attack on the rule of law by any means available, an all-out attack on the judge, on the court, on its authority to dare to thwart Trump, the man who wants to put the dick back in dictator. If there is any remaining doubt in Juan Merchan's mind about this, he must erase it. This is why the outburst from the witness Robert Costello, who is an attorney, where he complained about Merchan's rulings in real time as they happened, this could be the last straw that finally sends Trump to the big house. That was Trump's witness. The prosecution fought Merchan to keep him out. Merchan sided with the defense. The witness then metaphorically spit in Merchan's face. Not good on the old strategery front, Bob. Regardless, I don't care if it's for the rest of Trump's life or just for the rest of a day. Merchan has to put him in jail now. And to my mind, today would be a good day to do it. They're going to break for the holiday. Come back next Tuesday. Give him an all-expenses-paid, never-to-be-forgotten Memorial Day weekend at Rikers Island. I mean, at this point, it's pretty clear Trump won't really understand where he is anyway. As court began yesterday, he did not know what month it was, or where he was supposedly campaigning this week, or where the next election or primary or whatever is. He decided he was being kept from advocating for himself before the primaries in New Hampshire and Iowa, which happened last January. Nutsy Fagan.
And we go on day after day, and I tell Iowa, I'm sorry, I won't be able to make it. I tell New Hampshire, sorry, I won't be able to make it. I'm sitting in a nice box all day. As you know, I was supposed to be in a very different state this morning.
A different state? The state of being asleep, am I right? By the way, the money Cohen stole, and by the way, I've seen nothing funnier in the last decade than Eric Trump writing that this just got interesting because Cohen admitted for the second time that he swiped $30,000 when Eric has self-dealt on kids' cancer charities in the millions. The money Cohen stole was reimbursement for a company that was helping him and Trump fix a CNBC opinion poll about influential businessmen, fix it in Trump's favor, and they could only get Trump up to 9th on the list, so Trump stiffed them. Also notable, the Trump posse, the Republicans, the Renfields. A week ago, it was the Speaker of the House. I don't know how the hell he became Speaker of the House, but he's Speaker of the House. And a bunch of corrupt senators. Yesterday, Representative Keith Self, Representative Mary Miller, who is nuts, who quoted Hitler at a Stop the Steal rally, whose hubby had one of those 3% militia stickers on it, and Representative Andy Clyde, also known as Andy Clown, the one who said that January 6th was just a normal tourist visit. Yes, it has happened in our lifetimes. They are officially out of posse. Trump officially can no longer grab them by the posse. I'm still working sick with this sinus infection, so I'm particularly proud of that one line. In fact, I'm going to say it again. Trump can no longer grab them by the posse. The other Trump headlines, he's supposed to have a rally in the South Bronx day after tomorrow. He joked to donors that he fears he might get hurt there. As a native of the Bronx and the descendant of South Bronxians, I would say this is the first sign I have seen in months that he may not be crazy. By the way, the New York Times reported the little joke that he made to his donors. Guess which reporter reported that? No, it wasn't Katie Tur. Trump's Taylor Swift, meanwhile, Kid Rock, interview with Rolling Stone. In it, uses racial slurs, including the N-word, boasts he is part of America's political problem, and then, already drunk on wine and switching off to Jim Beam and cola, quote, he's sitting in a dark leather chair shouting at me about something or other when he reaches behind the seat, pulls out a black handgun, and waves it around to make some sort of point. Rock then notes, and I got a effing G-damn gun right here. If I need it, I got them everywhere. And somewhere Ted Nugent is chewing on his knuckles, going, I have to do better. I must do better than this. Remember last week's Trump lie? The 80,000 crowd in New Jersey, 80,000 at Wildwood, New Jersey, 100,000, 2 million, whatever it was. Nope, it's been withdrawn. From New Jersey Insider, NJ Insider, Lisa Fagan. I don't make these names up. Lisa Fagan, the Wildwood press spokesperson, the Associated Press originally cited as the source for the original crowd estimate, was quoted as saying the eye-popping estimate was based off her own observations on the scene Saturday, having seen dozens of other events in the same space. 5 days later, when asked to explain the wide variance between the AP reporting and the NewJersey.com video that reveals a crowd in the few thousands, Fagan provided a statement from Mayor Troiano of Wildwood at odds with what the wire service initially attributed to Fagan. Quote, as a tourist town, we speak in tourism numbers, Troiano wrote. When we see that volume of people attending a beach event, we know that 80,000 plus people are in our town. Now, I know that's Trumpian bookkeeping in a nutshell right there. Your crowd is maybe 7,200. You announce it's 80,000 or more because you and only you know that you mean that that's how many people must be in the whole town, because there's 7,000 people in that one part of the town. And, you could criticize this, but remember, it could be way worse. The mayor theoretically could have claimed that the crowd was 333,300,000, because that, of course, is how many people would be in our country when there's 7,200 people in that one space. And lastly, in the Trump news, this update on the presidential debates. Did I tell you he would find an excuse to back out? Did I tell you that he would soon be preparing a series of excuses to back out? That eventually he would take the one that seemed the least stupid? Well, he hasn't gotten to the least stupid yet, but he's preparing to back out, and he will back out.
I just want to debate this guy, but, and I'm going to demand a drug test, too, by the way. I am. No, I really am.
Now to the Sam Alito freak flag scandal, part 3. No, he has not changed his story again. Still, it's the wife's fault. Still, it's the school kids who could see the sign as they waited for the bus that hadn't been there for a month because it was remote learning. He hasn't changed the story since he changed it on Friday. Still has not suggested, by the way, in any of the variations of his stories, that he might believe that, say, a sitting justice of the Supreme Court of the United States letting any kind of protest flag hang in public from the flagpole in front of his own house for at least 3 days is wrong, whether it's a flag indicating stop the steal or steal the stop or Antifa or support for Canada. Doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with that. Has not denied that there was a protest and has not for the second or for a moment suggested that he and his family did not have the right to do that while they were still at the Supreme Court considering cases that could have decided or reversed the outcome of the 2020 election. And still relative silence from the Democrats because we have a bunch of cowards on our team, although there is a good idea, and we'll see if anybody does anything about it. There is a new development, a theory that the upside-down flag from January 2021 from Martha Ann Alito, it was all her fault. What does Sam Alito know from the flag sitting there on the giant flagpole in front of his house? What does he know from that? He never looks at the flag in front of his own house. He barely goes to his own house. Who's Martha Ann? Alexandria, Virginia? I don't know her. There is a new theory that the upside-down flag is part of a political pattern for which Alito should be punished in some way. The former legal editor at BuzzFeed, Chris Geidner, reports that in late August of last year, as the witch who calls herself Libs of TikTok continued to attack Bud Light and the company that owns it and the influencer Dylan Mulvaney, that somebody sold up to $15,000 in stock in the parent company of Bud Light. Guess who? Sam Alito. August 2023, indicating a pattern of political protest which violates the requirements that all judges, even the ones on the Supreme Court, must stay publicly apolitical. Well, I think that ship sailed a long time ago, like that speech that he gave after he visited the Vatican last year, in which he mocked everybody who wasn't Catholic. I think Sam Alito's concern about whether or not we might perceive him as political, that may have waned. He may not wake up in the middle of the night going, gee, I hope nobody thinks I'm political. But in any event, here's the argument. In August of 2023, according to the official filings, he sold between $1,000 and $15,000 in at least that amount and at least some of his stock in Anheuser-Busch. And this fellow, Chris Geidner, writing at lawdork.com, wrote, according to the Federal Judicial Financial Disclosure Reports database, Justice Samuel Alito sold at least some of his stock in Anheuser-Busch and bought stock in Molson Coors on Monday, August 14th, 2023. So he switched brands. Here's the problem with that. I have no respect whatsoever for Sam Alito, and I have no respect for the justices on the Supreme Court who, because they are lifetime appointees, have basically said F you to everybody else and all the rules, and this includes the liberals. But the fricasseeing of Dylan Mulvaney and Bud Light began in April of 2023, and we're now talking about something towards the middle of August 14th, 2023, and you have to ask yourself, if you accept the idea that a judge, or particularly a justice of the United States, justice of the Supreme Court, has the right to own stock, which is a debate, and I can see arguments on both sides of it, does he not have the right to bail out of a stock that has been failing from April onwards, even if it's his side of the political ball that has caused the failure? Does he not, by August, have the right to sell up to $15,000 worth of his investment and put it in a different beer stock? I just don't think this is a real pattern. Now, if he sold the stock and then she puts out the hit on Dylan Mulvaney, that's another story altogether. That's insider trading. But to call this insider trading, I think, is nonsensical. Is Alito a political sheep in sheep's clothing? Yes, of course. And again, should Supreme Court justices be able to own stocks? Much better question, but even that's kind of thin gruel for this. On the other hand, as in all stories in the timeline in which we live, a vital detail of the original story was missed because all of us who are looking for stuff like this have been going at about 3,700% of personal capacity since sometime in the summer of 2015. In the original New York Times story about Sam Alito's Stop the Steal flag at his house. I own a house? Word of the flag filtered back to the court people who worked there said in interviews. Word of the flag filtered back to the court. No, who? New York Times. You mean to Chief Justice Roberts, since he's nominally in charge, or a janitor somewhere? Or a clerk. I mean, remember who the clerks are, particularly on the conservative side, who they become. Laura Ingraham was one of Clarence Thomas's clerks. I think that's all you need to know about who those people are. But what are we saying here? Are we saying Chief Justice Roberts knew about this months ago, years ago, and didn't do anything about it? Well, is that not enough? Just that, whether it's Roberts or somebody else, just that one phrase in the New York Times, word of the flag filtered back to the court, people who worked there said in interviews, and the rest of it in there? Does that not suggest we need hearings? Congressman Steve Cohen has moved to censure Sam Alito. There is, of course, one small problem with that, which is that the House is controlled by the Democrats? No? Controlled by the Republicans? Well, there goes the idea that justice or truth or morality or the law will be enforced. To censure Sam Alito would require, just use the Barney Rubble test, would require Congresswoman Barney Rubble to vote for it. But there is a Judiciary Committee that is run by Democrats. It is in the Senate. Unfortunately, it is run by Dick Durbin, who is either afraid of something somebody has on him at the Supreme Court, or is the last guy in America who buys into this idea that the Supreme Court is somehow better than, say, the Supreme Theocratic Court of Iran. This sanctity of the Supreme Court. He's the last one who believes it. I don't think Sam Alito believes it anymore, and apparently Dick Durbin does. And they're not doing a damn thing except saying, you really need to put in some sort of etiquette and social responsibility and morality clause. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean morality, just conduct clause. I'm sorry, I wasn't getting into morality, Clarence Thomas. I'm sorry. We're not talking about all that stuff again with the videotapes. No. Here was the theory. originally, you could subpoena John Roberts and Sam Alito and ask them under oath, what about this flag jazz? At a Senate hearing or somewhere else in which Democrats could force the hearing to happen. And, of course, somebody would sue to stop their testimony. And guess where that would eventually wind up? The Supreme Court would rule on whether or not those Supreme Court justices had to testify. And, of course, even if, by chance, Roberts and Alito or Thomas and Alito were subpoenaed and thus really felt the need to recuse, oh, guess what? It's still 4 conservative votes to 3 liberal votes. However, as always, Brian Beutler at Off Message, once a Countdown contributor, has a better idea. Subpoena not Roberts or Alito or Thomas, but subpoena the liberal justices. Justice Brown Jackson, Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan. Subpoena them to come to the Democratic-run Senate Judiciary Committee. Why? As Beutler points out, and I recommend subscribing to his site, Off Message, in January 2022, there was one SCOTUS vote against giving the January 6th committee from the House access to the Trump White House records in its investigation of the insurrection. Who voted against it? Who was the one vote? Thomas. Why? Doesn't say. You're lucky that you know it's Thomas, civilians. November 2022, Alito and Thomas both voted against, or voted in favor in that case, of trying to stop the January 6th committee from getting access to Kelly Ward's phone. Kelly Ward has since been indicted in the fake electors plot in Arizona. And she is one of the first-class nut jobs in the entirety of the fascist underbelly in this country. Alito and Thomas defended her. Why? What was their reasoning? What was discussed before the ruling? No idea. March 24th, the quick ruling that erased the 14th Amendment this year. Also this year, they wouldn't expedite a review of presidential immunity. They're still sitting on presidential immunity. They're trying to find that fine line. They're trying to do that razor's edge thing, thread the needle. We're going to have presidential immunity, but it's not going to apply to Biden. You watch. And they would hear the bid to erase charging insurrectionists with the obstruction of official proceedings. That was voted upon, and they're hearing it. And who voted what way and what were the logical arguments? We don't know. In all cases, who voted which way, who said, yes, we will hear this case, who said we will not, all of the arguments they could make, all of the possibilities which can and has been made public in previous cases has not been made public. It is all a secret. It is not just the Supreme Court. It is the secret goddamned Supreme Court. And they're doing whatever the F they want. And Beutler's idea of how to interrupt that is, since Democrats do not control the House and cannot impeach Alito and Thomas, and there is no way to get them off the court, and John Roberts does not have the guts to turn in his resignation and not only completely destroy the court without, in fact, shifting it to a liberal court, but turn the court over to somebody who is in there to reform it and force Thomas and Alito out. Beutler's idea is call the liberals to testify to who said what in those negotiations, in those deliberations, the Alito and Thomas with Kelly Ward, the January 2022 vote over giving the January 6th committee the records from the Trump White House, the quick ruling erasing the 14th Amendment, the expedited or non-expedited review of presidential immunity, the attempt to fabricate presidential immunity. Who said what? Justice Sotomayor? I know you don't want to be here, but we need to find out the truth. At minimum, expose the conservative justices, particularly Alito and Thomas, on the record as siding with the insurrectionists. These cases, the Democratic Judiciary Committee investigation into insurrectionists on the Supreme Court, waited a little bit. If you're saying, what's the point?
Well, what was the point of ProPublica chasing down Harlan Crow and Clarence Thomas's giant bus, his RV? What was the point of that? What was the point of the Times going after what did Sam Alito know about the flag and when did he know it? 3 years ago? How long have they been working on that? Who knows what else will shake out? The point I have always made is that the first thing that has to happen before anything gets fixed is somebody has to stand up and say, this is wrong. And if you drag in Kagan and Sotomayor and Justice Brown Jackson, and you say, you're under oath, we need to know what Clarence Thomas said about this, what Samuel Alito said about this. If it goes no further than that, there is a record. Because who knows what else will shake out? Because that Bud Light story, the insider trading, the deal goes down in April and the insider trading, the guy sells in August. That's not insider trading. That's not even smart trading. The Bud Light story is meh, but the idea behind the Bud Light story is not meh. While Alito was hearing a case last year to hamstring the EPA, his wife was giving an energy company mineral rights, if the EPA were hamstrung, to what was in her 160 acres that she inherited from Daddy in Oklahoma. Was that a cash deal? Did she and hubby talk about that? Or did they not talk about anything like flags or 160-acre mineral rights? Suddenly I'm turning into Tom Brokaw. Mineral rights in Oklahoma. Was that a cash deal? What was that? What do Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson know about this? What can they tell us under oath? Bust up the Supreme Court. I mean, what kind of standards are we holding up in the Supreme Court? It's utterly corrupt, and there are 3 people who are nominally not corrupt, and they don't say anything. And nobody takes the chance of saying, let's poke around and see what's going to happen here, because what are we going to do? The Supreme Court is suddenly going to start ruling against liberals and against the Constitution. They're doing that now. We are already being beaten up by the bullies. Take the rock and hit the bully in the head. Every single smidge of corruption that can be brought to light not only increases the chances that we stop the corruption, but also it plays into the election. Who knows how many voters don't understand that the Supreme Court is corrupt now and will only get more corrupt as, in a Trump presidency, Alito, certainly Thomas, retire, and Trump said over the weekend he wants to appoint new judges throughout the judicial system, including the Supreme Court, who will still be on the bench in the year 2070. That's what he wants. That's what they want. They want this country to be ruled like Iran. The election is not just our hope of avoiding this now. It may very well be our last hope. Also of interest here, and speaking of Iran, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s voting address, the one on all those forms for all that ballot access, so he can be a spoiler for Trump. He doesn't live there. The place on the address, no, he doesn't live there. Nobody's seen him there. He's been voting from there since 2008. Also, right after the president of Iran was killed in that helicopter accident, who does RFK Jr. bring up? The president of Iran. And he said the president of the United States, whoever that would be, and he really thinks it's going to be him, he said the president of the United States needs to negotiate with the president of Iran. Only the guy he thinks is the president of Iran is not the new one that they haven't voted in yet, and isn't the dead one. He's 3 presidents of Iran ago. That's who Robert F. Kennedy wants to negotiate with. That's how crazy he is. Worst person's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown, I missed Willie Mays' birthday, meaning I missed the opportunity to tell you of the day I, as a 20-year-old broadcasting rookie, had to call him and interview him
about the day he got banned from baseball. And before I could ask him one question, Willie Mays did a fake voice. And it was some fake voice. I can't even use it in telling you the story. Things I promised not to tell coming up. But first, as ever, there are still more new idiots to talk about. The daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze worser Politico. The increasingly right-leaning insider publication in the increasingly right-leaning media landscape where they're all sitting around going, how do we protect our phony baloney jobs and our money in the case of Trump winning and the country going fascist? I'll just read this quote from Politico writer Calder McHugh. Honestly, Calder McHugh. You sure his name isn't Hugh McCalder? Calder McHugh, who has an idea of how to stay in power even if the fascists take over Washington again. It's impossible to know, he writes, exactly how Trump will behave if he returns to office. Well, first of all, let me just interject here, bullshit. By all accounts, Trump has professionalized his 2024 campaign, writes Hugh McCalder, suggesting he learned something from his slapdash first campaign and his 2020 re-election loss. Yes, he learned not to have any more elections. But you haven't learned that, have you, Cal McHuder? The question is whether his views on presidential prerogatives have changed or whether he intends to be guided by loftier principles. This guy writes this, and it's not meant ironically. Loftier principles. Trump's idea of loftier principles are ideas that get him more money. Second half, this is from the Politico email newsletter, and it speaks to how corrupt is nowadays. Nobody even bothers to cover it up. Corruption at every level of American society is so deep that nobody said, no, don't do that. They do this every week on the Politico email newsletter. I guess it's the Saturday edition, in which they have great weekend reads curated by Ryan Lizza. Ryan Lizza, who used to be with The New Yorker, got fired for something we never found out what, involving their behavior patterns and their rules. Nobody ever explained what it was. I think I know what it was, but I'm not ready to tell you yet. But it was not nice. Ryan Lizza, great weekend reads, and he lists 8 or 9 long articles that are usually appealing only to people who have lots of spare time and a very, very low threshold or very high threshold for being bored. The first one, great weekend reads, curated by Ryan Lizza, on the campaign trail by New York Magazine's Olivia Nuzzi. Donald Trump is running for president while bumping into the past at a Manhattan criminal courthouse. They are their boyfriend and girlfriend. Ryan Lizza pimping Olivia Nuzzi's article about Donald Trump and the campaign trail and the trial. Boyfriend and girlfriend, and make no secret of this. Unlike her past relationships, there's no secret involved in this. The first one, and there are 7 or 8 other. You couldn't have the presence of mind to say, why don't I put the one about you third? And, would you hand me that cup of coffee? I put you third so it doesn't look like the term technically is log rolling. And I'm pushing your article because you're my girlfriend. Jesus, just pretend. Pretend that there's some ethics involved. Runner-up, worser. This isn't really worse, but I needed a place to stick it, and I've been saving it because of this sickness for a little while here. The Republican primary for the Senate in Maryland, Larry Hogan, the former governor, or the outgoing governor, 63% of the vote. Robin Ficker was the runner-up with 30% of the vote. Robin Ficker. I looked at this and I went, Robin Ficker? Robin Ficker? Does the name sound familiar? This is my worlds colliding. Until 1998, Robin Ficker was the heckler in professional sports. He went to every one of the Washington Bullets and then Washington Wizards game. He sometimes had a portable megaphone with him. He sat in the front row right behind the visiting bench. He used insults, personal insults, derogatory terms, sat right behind the bench. Several coaches had to be restrained from going after him physically. And he was such a fan that when they changed arenas and reassigned everybody to new seats, they would not sell him those same front row seats. And so he stopped being a fan of the team. So a real dedicated fan who was not there just to make fun of the other players. I believe it was Charles Barkley who once in the middle of one of these Ficker monologues threw a wet, sweaty towel and got it to wrap perfectly in a tight camera shot around Robin Ficker's face. He's 80-something, he runs for office every couple of years, and he was the runner-up in the Republican primary for Senate. So when they talk about what an invincible candidate the Republicans have trotted out for the Senate from Maryland, just remember, the guy he beat is a retired ex-heckler from the NBA. But our winner, the worst, RFK Jr. Not a good week for being RFK Jr., not a good month, not a good year, not a good decade, not a good lifetime, ultimately. The New York Post reports that Kennedy, quote, lists his residence to vote as a Tony, Westchester County address, which is in foreclosure proceedings for non-payment court records show. The independent candidate claims his voting address is 84 Croton Lake Road in Katona, though he is not the owner of the $1 million in arrears property, does not show up in residential searches for it, and some longtime neighbors and even local authorities were shocked at the notion it's his home. But RFK Jr. also has the same address listed as his domicile or residence on his presidential nomination petitions filed in New Hampshire in recent months, according to the records which were obtained by the Post. And he's been voting from this address since at least 2008, according to the New York Post. So everything about Robert F. Kennedy, including his eligibility for being on the ballot in places like New Hampshire, could be challenged if anybody would get around to doing that. He's been lying about his address all this time, or he doesn't know where he lives. And we have more evidence supporting the later theory of those two. The day after the president of Iran was killed in a chopper accident, RFK Jr. demanded that the president of the United States, presumably himself, negotiate with the president of Iran. Only, right now, there ain't a president of Iran. And it's getting worse from this point. Just listen to this.
Sitting down with other world leaders, with people like President Xi and President Putin and President Ahmadinejad, or the Prime Minister, all the people.
President Ahmadinejad? Mahmoud Ahmadinejad? Or do you mean somebody else like Barney Ahmadinejad? Because Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has not been president of Iran since August of 2013. His term expired. He's tried to run twice since, and he's too nuts even for the government of Iran. RFK Jr. thinks he's president. It's been almost 11 years. RFK Jr., you will never convince me that the worm is dead. Today's worst person in the world with a worm in his brain. Now to the number one story on the countdown, and I have to confess, this has been a strong effort. I hope you appreciate this. I'm playing hurt. Full edition. And my favorite topic, me, which I've already discussed and complimented myself. Now, things I promised not to tell, and I am late to the party. It was 2 weeks ago yesterday. But Willie Howard Mays turned 93 years old earlier this month, and he is the greatest defensive athlete I have ever seen in any sport. Saw him in person when I was a kid, and also one of the top 5 offensive athletes in any sport. And this is now the 74th baseball season since his debut and the 51st season since his retirement. And everybody ever in baseball in all that time has met him. And he is still rightly celebrated wherever he goes, whenever his name is brought up. And me, amidst all this celebration and literally half a century or more of glorification of Willie Mays, when his name comes up, I think of only one thing. The first time I interviewed him in the off-season of 1979-80, and I'm not going to say it was a strange interview, but I am expecting that I will be getting over it any day now. maybe. It was at my first job for my radio network when, God help me, Willie Mays was 17 years younger than I am now. And like I wasn't scared enough to talk to Willie Mays, he started that interview by doing a bit, a comedy bit, that if I had done it, then they would have fired me. The other thing I think of is an amazing injustice that befell Willie Mays that nobody talks about and nobody registers anymore. Okay, the first part. So it's a Saturday afternoon, October 27th, 1979, just 43 and a half years ago, and Willie Mays has just been banned from baseball because word has gotten out that he has signed a contract to do promotional events for a casino in Atlantic City, and there is a news conference coming up in 2 days on Monday. Now, try explaining this whole concept to any current sports fan. Any current sports fan now used to seeing retired players on TV telling them how to bet and who to bet on, or the sportscasters doing the games, giving you the latest odds and how they have changed since the last period or inning started. Plus, this was like 3 months after Willie Mays was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. 3 months after the celebration of this brilliant career, and now they've banned him for life for something that today the commissioner would have sent him a note of congratulations, to say nothing of a large paycheck. And nobody has done an interview with Willie Mays yet because he has been traveling. And my phone rings in my little cubbyhole at the United Press International radio network that I've only been working at since August. 3 months. That's how long my full-time broadcasting career has been to this point. And on the phone is maybe the top baseball reporter of the second half of the 20th century. Keith, it's Milt Richmond. This man once reported in July 1955 that if the Milwaukee Braves did not start winning, that they would fire their manager exactly 1 year later. And they didn't start winning, and exactly 1 year later, to the day, they fired their manager. Keith, write this phone number down. It's Willie Mays. Milt never got excited about anything. He talked like this all the time. Willie Mays is expecting your call for an interview about this banishment story. And I squeaked, yes, sir. And I went into one of our recording studios and I dialed Willie Mays' phone number. And I will not recreate the voice that I heard answer Willie Mays' phone. Because while doing this voice was once considered to be a staple of American humor, even American humor written or performed by liberals, I mean, James Thurber's short stories are full of this voice. The voice is wildly racist. It is racist enough that if today you heard an African-American man do it, even Willie Mays, you'd probably say, no, still racist. Don't do it, Willie. It was a voice similar to the actress Hattie McDaniel, who won the Academy Award in 1939 for Gone with the Wind. She was a world-class blues singer, a top patriotic fundraiser during World War II, and she played maids, housekeepers, in maybe 200 films. She also played one on a famous radio show and was paid so little that while she was performing her role of the pretend maid, she had to keep working as a real maid. Okay, so I'm 20 years old and I have to interview Willie Mays about him getting banned from baseball, which is crazy enough. And I call and the phone is answered and a gravelly but feminine voice that sounded exactly like Hattie McDaniel says, "Hello, Mr. Mays' residence." And I'm a little thrown, but I power through it somehow and I explain who I am. And she says, and I say where I'm calling from. And she says, and I say, Milt Richmond said Mr. Mays was expecting my call. And she interrupts and goes, "This is Willie." The Hattie McDaniel impersonation was being done by Willie Mays. Now, I do not have this on tape. Silly me. When my bosses said, "You may not start recording before you get express permission from the interviewee to start recording," I believed them and I lived by that rule. Anybody else would have a tape of this phone being answered and the Hattie McDaniel impression done by Willie Mays, because the first thing you do is record so you don't have to remember to record, because otherwise you'll forget to record. But I'm afraid you are going to have to take my word for this, because why would I make this up? October 27th, 1979. And I still haven't recovered. Mr. Mays's residence. Happy 92nd birthday, Willie Mays. Now, the injustice that Willie Mays suffered that nobody talks about. In fact, I've never heard him talk about it. This is something else that no fan believes today. The United States military used to draft Major League Baseball players and NFL players and NBA players and send them into the service in the middle of their seasons, in the primes of their careers, even if there was no war in progress. They only did it a couple of times after, say, 1945, and usually that was thinly veiled racist political pressure, such as when they drafted Muhammad Ali in 1966 when he was heavyweight champion of the world and an activist Muslim, and he was 24 years old when everybody else getting drafted was 18. Remember that? But in 1952, they also drafted Willie Mays. He had come up from the minors the year before and had led the New York Giants from 13 games back to the National League pennant, and he was the kind of all-around whirlwind of a player nobody had ever seen before in Major League Baseball. And on May 29th, 34 games into his second season, boom, he was drafted and inducted, and he missed the rest of that season and all of the 1953 season. I can't think of a parallel today. Maybe they draft in the middle of his second season somebody like Fernando Tatis, and in the middle of May, he's gone for the rest of this year and next year because he has to go serve in the military. Now, they didn't draft Mickey Mantle, who also broke in New York in 1951 the way Mays did. And to be fair, Mickey Mantle had about 400 medical problems that would have kept anybody out of the military, and it was all legit. But they also didn't draft the 1951 American League Rookie of the Year winner, Gil McDougald of the Yankees, who was a white guy, or Walt Dropo, who was the Rookie of the Year in 1950, or Roy Sievers, who was the Rookie of the Year in 1949, or you get the point here. Now, trying to calculate should-have-beens in sports is a risky enough business, but you can get an approximation of what might have happened. If a player hits 20 homers in his first year and then misses 2 years, and then he comes back and he hits 41 homers in his first year back, you can extrapolate that he probably would have hit 27 homers in the first missing year and 34 in the second missing year. Your numerical sequence is 20 homers, then 27 homers, then 34 homers, then 41 homers. You have to tinker a little bit with it in Mays' case because he didn't miss all of that second season, 1952. He just missed from June on, and he'd had a slow start. He'd only hit 4 homers in the first 2 months of 1952. So instead of 27 that year, maybe he only hits 24 that year. So a good guess as to how many homers Willie Mays did not get to hit because he got drafted and all the white guys did not get drafted is, all told, 54. In real life, playing between 1951 and 1973, Willie Mays finished with 660 home runs. For most of the 1960s, it was thought he was the man who would challenge Babe Ruth's career record. Not Hank Aaron, but Willie Mays. Willie Mays hit 660 homers, but if you give him those 54 more homers he might have hit if he hadn't been so curiously drafted in 1952, Willie Mays would have finished with 714 home runs. 714, which is exactly how many Babe Ruth hit. So if he doesn't get drafted, maybe in 1972 and 1973 and 1974, we are seeing Willie Mays hit his 700th career home run, challenging Babe Ruth's record, and then tying and breaking Babe Ruth's record. And then right behind him, Henry Aaron hits his 715th homer, and then his 716th homer to break the all-time record held by Willie Mays.
Mr. Mays' residence. That's not how it sounded. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards, and it was produced by TKO Brothers. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer was my friend Larry David. Everything else was pretty much my fault, but once again, I did a good job today, considering. That's countdown for this, the 169th day until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,232nd day since dictator J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the legal system, such as it is. Use the mental health system. Use presidential immunity if it happens. Use the not regularly given elector objection option to stop him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Still day to day on that with the sinus. We're all day to day, especially me. Till the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.